Hi, everybody. It's Michelle Hill, your legacy builder at Winning Proof. And I am so excited today because I have Bob Logan, who is we were in a Toastmasters group together, and that's where I met Bob. And I am going to read his very interesting bio before we dive into a conversation. Okay. Bob Logan has walked many paths in life, and today he would like to take all of us on a short journey with him as well. As they say, travel the road less traveled, and you will marvel at the people, experiences, and opportunities you will find along the way. Bob is truly a Renaissance man, from high school history teacher to selling multi-million-dollar mainframe computers for AT&T, from a football coach in multiple NCAA Division I bowl games to being the head coach of an Italian football team in Bologna, Italy. See, my inner Italian came out from my mother's side.
There you go.
Yeah. Finally, to raising millions of dollars of philanthropy to helping with missions landing on the Mars and near-Earth asteroids. Bob has seen it all. But before we get started, here are a couple of fun facts about Bob that I found hysterical and interesting. On Christmas Day in 1979, Bob snuck into the Fiesta Bowl game between the University of Pittsburgh and Dan Marino and the University of Arizona without a ticket. And he went onto the field for the halftime show dressed as Santa Claus. I love that. And I love this too. As a football coach, Bob was one win away from coaching in the Super Bowl. He will make us all think about how to live our lives better by taking risks. We're going to dive into that. Accepting change, dive into that. And most importantly, to have more fun in our lives. After all, life is too short to do otherwise. So after all that, Bob, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Hey, Michelle, thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to having a chat. It's been a wild ride for me, and I'm looking forward to seeing how you're going to grill me, put me on the hot seat here.
Well, as I said, Bob and I were part of a Toastmasters group with Dr. Kevin Snyder, and
Right.
that's how we originally became, acquainted. And
Yeah.
so, Bob, I want to start out by just you expanding on what I read in your bio and just give us a little snapshot of your history and fill in the gaps for us.
You know, it's funny. The bio's correct. I mean, I've been a teacher, I've been a computer salesman, I've been a fundraiser, I've been an athletic director, been an assistant dean, and now I'm a motivational speaker and an author. And I kind of laugh, but I just tell people, I just can't keep a job. It's just obvious I can't keep a job. But the point is, and we'll maybe get into this a little bit, all these transitions from being an athletic director, raising money, and I was a former coach at the University of Arizona. We played in multiple bowl games. I've got a Sports Illustrated story about our team behind me in the frame, and then being recruited to go to the College of Science at the University of Arizona. My degree is in history. All right, I knew nothing about science, and it was interesting because I wanted to be an athletic director. And I knew that in order for me to become the AD at Arizona, I would have to move away to a different school and maybe sow my oats at 2 or 3 different places and maybe come back. Well, I love Tucson. I love Arizona. I was an Air Force brat, lived in 7 schools in 12 years. I didn't want to move my family around. I just wanted to stay in Tucson and work at the U of A. And I thought, if I go to the College of Science, a place I know nothing about, and everybody in my sphere of influence was saying I was making a huge mistake for my career. But I thought if I excelled there, that would be a pretty good answer to an interview question about interviewing at the U of A to be an athletic director. Well, long story made short, I really liked it there. And missions to Mars and launches at Cape Canaveral, it kind of made me understand that 4th and goal from the 1-yard line pales in comparison to landing on Mars. So the message is taking risks is okay. Don't be afraid to try something different.
Oh, I love that. Yes, and it's so funny too because we're on our life path. We're on, and we're going to talk about your book, Finding Your Path, a
Right.
little bit later. But it's just so funny because we're on this path. It's an expected path most of the time, and then life throws us a few, and I'll say it's a baseball analogy, but
Yeah.
curveballs, and then it ends up being our destiny because
Right.
we're open enough to follow that path. So
Right.
what I want to ask you is like, what did you learn during your football coaching years that really, really translated into life after football?
Oh, I mean, I'm a big guy. I'm a football guy. I'm a jock. I look like an athlete. No, not much of an athlete anymore, but I loved coaching football. And, that was a path that I was maybe going to go on. I was going to be a collegiate head coach at some point. I have some friends of mine that I coach with that are head coaches. You learn organization, you learn teamwork, you learn how to get up when you're knocked down. You learn all these life skills that are applicable to the business world. And when I give talks, one of the things I talk about is, football, a football huddle is very interesting. You get 11 guys around a huddle, and you have fat guys, you've got fast guys, you've got African American guys, you've got white guys, you've got smart guys, and then maybe not so smart guys. And guess what? They all work together as a team to do one thing, to move the ball down the field for the next first down and hopefully the next touchdown. And it doesn't matter what their socioeconomic background is, how much money they have, what school, none of that matters. They're all worried about doing one thing, and that's trying to succeed. And I think the huddle is a good analogy for what it's like in the workplace. So that to me is one of the best things that I learned from my football experience is, learning how to deal with people in good times and in adverse times. You need to be able to overcome adversity.
Oh, yes, without a doubt. And before we started recording, we were talking about that and how I got into working with sports
Right.
players, with particularly a lot of NFL, and we called it reckless art, that's kind of what it looks like on the field. And I think about that every time I see a game. So talking about reckless art and that poster behind you,
Yes.
just describe that and what that's all about.
All
So
right, let me see if I can move my head a little bit and where you can see which way. Okay, there you go.
yeah, perfect.
So that is in 1986. I was coaching at the University of Arizona. We had a very good football team. We were one game away from playing in the Rose Bowl, and we were preparing for our arch rival, Arizona State, up the road in Tempe. And it's a bitter, bitter rivalry. And Sports Illustrated decided to come and spend an entire week with our football staff as we prepared for the Arizona State football game. So that's the article. It's 1, 2, 3, and a 10-page or 11-page article in Sports Illustrated, and it was in the college football preview issue, the big thick one that comes at the beginning of the season. And you can't see me, but right up, let's see if I can do this here. Right there, I'm in that photograph. So I can say that I have a photograph in Sports Illustrated. But yeah, that was pretty cool.
But not the swimsuit issue.
No, 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 no. Yeah, you don't want to see me in a Speedo.
Okay. Well, so after your football career, you, as I read too, you took some different paths
Yeah,
along your way, and some of them seem unrelated.
right.
But do you find that all the unrelated paths kind of build on one another to take you to your destiny?
It does. And
How?
it's really hard to describe on how I chose to move from one thing to the next. Early on, I wanted to be a football coach. So I had to figure out to leave my high school, where I graduated from here in Tucson, South Point Catholic, where I was teaching and coaching after my degree. And I wanted to be a football coach at the college level because I loved coaching. I love teaching, but they're both full-time jobs. And I couldn't do it justice doing both jobs. So I wanted to be a football coach. And I was able to work my network and get an opportunity at the University of Arizona. My head coach was Larry Smith, great coach. He has since passed away. He got the job at USC, Southern California. And I was a graduate assistant. I couldn't afford to go to Los Angeles and live on that salary. And I had this opportunity from Coach Smith to go to Bologna, Italy, to coach in the Italian Football League as a head coach, no less. And I thought, if I want to be a coach at the collegiate level, what better way to be a head coach in a land that I can't even speak the language? And that was just an amazing experience, because guess what? I was there a year, came back, and people always ask me about this Italian football experience. So it's a conversation starter, and it kind of gets people to scratch their head. What makes somebody pick up and move their wife to Italy to coach football? Not many people would do that, but I viewed it as an opportunity to be successful, because it was a very good team. And yes, we were one win from the Super Bowl, but it's the Italian Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
But it just showed me that, thinking through what this might look like a couple of years later is how I made many decisions. So moving from athletics to the College of Science, I told you that story, that
Yes.
if I can really do well, it will help me with other jobs down the road. And it turns out I didn't need another job down the road. But, all these things. And the other part I think is really important. I have always had amazing bosses. And I knew that, coaching with Larry Smith was going to be amazing. My dean in the College of Science, Joaquin Ruiz, is a rock star. He's amazing. So making sure the space that you're in is supported by the people you're going to be working for is really imperative to success.
Oh, that's so rich. And I have to ask about Bologna, Italy. I'm sure you get this a lot. Is the food, I've never been to Italy. It's on my bucket list just because part of my heritage is Italian. Is
Right.
the food as incredible as people say it is in
Yeah.
Italy?
So here's the background in Italy. Italy is kind of divided in half. And the southern part is the part you see on movies in America, the red and white checker tablecloths and the southern spaghetti and things like that. Northern Italy, which is from about Bologna, a little bit south of Bologna north, is much more French, Swiss, Germanic. It's much more cosmopolitan, and you see many more white sauces and actually, I think, better food. Bologna specifically is the food capital of all of Western Europe. The Culinary Institute of Europe is in Bologna. In fact, Bologna's name is Bologna il Grosso, Bologna the Fat, because there's so many great restaurants. And I have to tell you, a couple of my players on my team owned restaurants in Bologna, and we've been back and we've eaten there. It's amazing food. So you got to get there and do it. Put Bologna on your list. It would normally not be on your list, but if you want to be a foodie, go to Bologna.
Absolutely. I am a foodie, and I'm so hungry right now. I can't even describe it. So thank you for that embellishment of
No problem.
Bologna, because that sounds incredible. So
Yeah.
coming back to the States, and then you worked for AT&T for a
Right.
while, and that just seems so disconnected to all the other things you did. So
yes,
how was that?
There's a connection. So
Mhm.
remember, I was in Bologna, Italy, 1986, 87. No email, no cell phones yet, not many using computers. So, it was basically phone calls. And football coaching in the United States is a good old boy network. It's all about who you know and finding out, okay, who's going to get fired here? And could I be the linebacker coach there? That type of thing. But it cost me $900. My first month phone bill from Bologna was $900. So I stopped making phone calls. It was too expensive. Anyway, the year ended. I came back, and I was halfway through my graduate degree, my MBA program. So I dropped out of the workplace and went to school full time for 2 years as a mid-30s guy. And it was so tough, Michelle, because my best friends were lawyers and doctors and, starting their big careers. And here I was back in school. But I got my degree, and then I was recruited by AT&T, their computer systems division, to sell mainframe computers and networked operating systems. And this is during the days when you were really powerful at work if you had a computer on your desk, because not everybody did. And I was selling computers during the glory days of IBM and everybody networking. And yeah, it was crazy for about 5 years.
Okay. So yeah, and that just seems so, like, it seems disconnected from your football coaching.
Oh,
But how did that AT&T selling mainframes, and in the glory days especially,
yeah.
how did that parlay into your present time of
So,
motivational speaking? How do you get there?
well, it's all about people. It's all about relationship building. It's all about knowing how to deal with people. So, as a history teacher at my local high school, I'm trying to teach 13 and 14-year-old kids to like the Holy Roman Empire and Charlemagne. That's hard. They don't want to hear about history, but I made it really fun. And then working for AT&T, I mean, it was a Fortune 2 or 3 company, one of the biggest companies in the world at the time. And I was in a 6-month training program, learning about sales, learning about relationships. So knowing how to navigate the sales environment was a special skill. And when I was finished with that experience, I got laid off with 15,000 other people because our division was sold to NCR Corporation. So, I got a little tiny golden parachute, and, I maintained my relationships with the University of Arizona. I was in graduate school with an assistant AD, became a friend of mine, Ted Kissel. He went to become the AD at Dayton for many years. And he called me up and said, "Hey, we've got a job up in Phoenix. Are you interested?" And I said, "Absolutely." And that's how I started a 10-year career, basically raising money for the University of Arizona Athletic Department.
Wow. Yeah. And I think that's a secret to just being on the conveyor belt of life,
Yep.
so to speak, is that seeing each of our experiences as building blocks to the next one.
Absolutely.
They all are connected, really. Even though things seem disconnected, they are connected, because that AT&T went to this, and then to this, and then to this. So,
and I think it's all transferable skills. So if I'm in an interview and they're asking me about AT&T experience, I'm not talking about mainframe parallel processing computers. I'm talking about the sales cycle and how do you develop relationships, and how do you convince somebody that has been embedded with IBM for their entire work existence and convince them to change to AT&T. So, those are skills that really can work for many other things later in life.
yeah, and like you said, you were teaching high school students
Right.
history and trying to sell them on historical facts that they were just like, but you made it interesting.
Yeah.
Same thing. I mean, are you one of the people that say you're always selling? You'll always be selling? Or how do you approach that?
I am, well, you know what? Fundraising and development at a university level is really not selling. What happens is people think raising money is like selling insurance or selling used cars. Those are transactional type arrangements, transactional type relationships. Development, I may be let's say you're a donor prospect, Michelle, and you had a bunch of money. I may be working with you for 1, 2, or 3 years before I ever even talk about supporting the university. In fact, if I do it properly, we're going to develop such a strong bond in a relationship. There's going to be a point, because they know what I do. They know what my job is. They will say, Bob, I love everything about the athletic department or the College of Science, and I think we can help. Why don't we start talking about where could our investment help your enterprise. And that is the glory of development and relationship building. So it's not always selling, it's always building relationships. I would put it in that term.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you said that, because most people are so averse to selling. Just, oh, I'm not a salesman, and oh, that's selling, I could never do that. But it's really all about relationships. And I've read the book by him, Harvey Mackay.
Oh yeah,
dig your well before you're thirsty.
that's right.
And the whole book, it's, even though it's an older book, it's a classic because it's all about that, building relationships. And that's the most important thing.
And the other thing that I think is really important, people ask me, boy, Bob, it's got to be really tough to ask people for $1 million or that type of thing. And what's interesting about meetings, and many people are not good at this. If I told you that the best meeting I could have with a donor is when I don't say very much at all, it's about listening. And I think too many times with this active world of social media, we're only worried about the next thing that's going to come out of our mouth than listening intently with the person that you're talking to. And so listening is a skill that I was really able to develop during all these years of raising money and developing relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing I really love about Harvey Mackay's book, is that when you're in a social setting, if you've done your homework, you will say, oh, you just had a birthday, or, oh, you have a birthday coming up. Nobody does that. And that's the connection that people like really value.
Right. You know, something else that I think is really important too is, I don't know if I can reach up here and get it, but I'm a big, huge proponent. You know, I'm old school of writing personal notes to people.
Yes.
And I have purchased this stationery from Crane Stationery, high-end stationery. You know, my address is embossed on the back flap of the envelope, and it's a really hard stock card. And it's lined with like, it looks like a basketball, like a lizard lining. Very expensive, you know, but maybe $2 or $3 a card. But let me tell you, when that shows up in your mailbox with all of the stuff you pull out, and you see a handwritten address to you, that's the first thing you're going to open. And I've got many stories of people that still have thank you notes that I have written to people. And I think it's a skill that if you want to young people, if you want to differentiate yourself from the crowd, start writing personal notes, because it's not done anymore. It's all done via email or text. Yes.
Oh, as an old school person myself, I am such a believer in that. And I do that for my clients, and I will do that, you know, on other occasions as well. But I was not forced, because I was a natural writer as a child. But when I received Christmas presents from grandparents, even, my parents said, go write your thank you note. And it was required, you know, to go into your room or wherever you were going to do it and write a thank you note mentioning that specific gift that you got. And that was such a great habit to get into. Yeah. And like I said, I do that for new clients now. And when I just had a client who he and his wife had four husky dogs.
Oh, and I've got a husky.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
That's awesome. So are you going to show a picture?
Yeah, go ahead. Keep talking.
Okay. So they adopted another rescue husky, a fifth one. And so I have my gifter who is in California, and she does all of my gifting, and she has branded cards. And I had her send him a dog toy bone little gift card. Yeah, that's there. There you go. Oh, yeah, the eyes are incredible.
Yeah, we love huskies.
Yeah, so you know, but that little nicety, which is just a very simple thing, was just met with, oh, thank you so much. I did get an email saying, yes, I got it. And oh, it was just lovely and all that. So
let me tell you a quick thank you note story. Can I tell you a quick story?
Please do.
So I give talks at Canyon Ranch. It's a world-renowned spa in Tucson, Arizona, also in Lenox, Massachusetts. And one of the things we do during my talk is we talk about the power of gratitude, power of thank you. And I show a video, powerful video, where people pick up the phone and call somebody important and tell them how important they are. And we do the same thing, except we write a thank you note. So in front of the group, I hand out thank you notes. They're pre-stamped. I said, you're going to write a thank you note to somebody important in your life right now, and you're going to address it, and I'm going to mail them tonight when I go home. Okay. And so many weeks later, I get a call from Canyon Ranch, and they said, you got to call this woman in Northern California. So I call her up. I didn't remember her. And so I get on the phone with her, and she says, you know, when I was in your session, I thought the thank you note was kind of I wasn't into it. So I wrote my thank you note to Pedro, the busboy at the Mexican restaurant in Palo Alto that I go to occasionally, and thought nothing of it. Many months later, I go to the restaurant, and Pedro is there, and he sees me, and he loses his mind, jumping up and down. Oh, hi, Sarah, hi, Sarah. And he comes up, and in his apron, he has the thank you note that she wrote to him. And he's been clearly showing it to people at the tables for months. It's all torn up and everything. Wow. And the great part of the story is Pedro doesn't read. So he couldn't read the English. So he had to give it to the manager of the restaurant to read this story about how a great busboy Pedro is. And it was just an amazing tear-jerking story.
Oh, it is a tear-jerking story. And I hope that inspires some people to do that. You know, if we would all just take, like a week or two ago, I was at church, and it was a sermon on gratefulness. So it wasn't part of the sermon, but I came home and I thought, you know what? I'm going to tell 5 of the closest people to me how much I value them and am grateful for them. And it was great. It was just great for me. I got way more joy out of it, I think, than anybody else. But that story is just, we don't know how we're going to change a life by doing that.
And here's something interesting too that I've learned about the chemicals in the brain. There's a chemical called oxytocin. Yes. And when you give a gift to somebody, they get a dose of oxytocin, where that feel good feeling of getting. But guess what? You also get a dose of oxytocin when you're giving the gift. So if you see something good happening, that person's getting the oxytocin, and you experiencing it are receiving oxytocin. So gratitude and giving is actually very good for your health.
Yeah, absolutely. And it should be just so natural to us. And sometimes we do have to be intentional about it, and we need reminders because we get so focused. So what I want to do now is kind of turn a corner a little bit and make a shift and talk about your book, Finding Your Path. And I want you to tell me where the idea originally came from and what your process was. How did you approach it? How long did it take you? And what it's all about. And I know that's a multi-tiered question.
Well, let me say this. I am not an author by trade. I'm good with people, but I'm the worst procrastinator in the world. And sitting down at a computer to type this thing out, it took me 6.5 years to write this book. Okay. It's been a labor of love to get there. My parents have died early. My only brother died young at age 37. So I only have my wife and a couple of kids and a brother-in-law south of here. So I don't have a huge family. And, and I've been to many conferences with speakers, have books, and nothing against any of these other speakers, but many of them are books that are just merely meant to be able to sell from the stage. Okay. And I'm going to do that too. And I've done that with groups that I've spoken to, but my book has quite a bit of content. The backstory is this, and I'm going to show you the cover.
Yes, please do.
So here's the cover of the book.
Let your path find you.
This path is from a place called the Camino de Santiago. And for those of you that do not know about the Camino, all I'm going to do is tell you, go Google the Camino de Santiago, okay? It is a 500-mile pilgrimage across northern Spain. It concludes at the cathedral in Santiago de Compostela, and that is where the remains of one of Jesus's apostles, St. James, are buried. And people have been walking this path for about 2,000 years. Last year, about 250,000 people walked the Camino to Santiago. I've walked it 3 times. I did the 500 miles in 2 sections, 300 miles the first time, 250 miles the second time. And then I went with my wife the 3rd time, and we did the entire Camino with buses and trains and walking. Mm-hmm. The Camino is a totally life-changing experience. And you don't have to be Catholic. You don't have to be Christian, although it is a Christian pilgrimage. You can be Buddhist, you can be African American. It's a spiritual experience. And if you can imagine, every day you're doing the same thing. You sleep in a bunk bed with hundreds of other people in a room, farting and snoring, the whole thing. And you get up in the morning and you walk 15 to 20 miles with many people all walking in the same direction. They're all doing the same thing. And you meet people from all over the world. Now, when I went on the Camino, I had some issues going on with my job that I won't go into detail, not huge, but I wanted to kind of clear my head. That was my burden, okay? Guess what? Everybody on the Camino is carrying a burden. And when I would talk to people at dinner time, you're talking with people that have stage 4 cancer, or a husband just passed away, or a spouse has just passed away, or somebody cheated on me, or they had a teenage son die in a car accident. I mean, tragic stories, and they're all there trying to release by walking the Camino. I don't do meditation, but let me tell you, when you walk for 8 hours, you are meditating and thinking about your life and what's important to you. So when I came back the 2nd time in 2015, I was building my speaking business at the time, and I actually went to a conference, and it was about speakers in the college space, which is where I should be, right? And I'm hearing all these speakers. This one guy gets on the stage, and he's a snake oil salesman, man. He is selling why you need to have a book to be a speaker. And I'm like, wow, I don't even have a website yet. You got to be kidding me. So I ended up talking to this guy, and he had a little formula, but I ended up doing a lot of the work myself. Creating this book has been just such a huge catharsis for me. And what's really gratifying, just like the thank you note, you don't know how good my book was, because my wife didn't even read it until it got published. I was embarrassed to show people. I didn't know if it was good enough. If you know Brene Brown, she talks about not enough, not handsome enough, not rich enough, not good enough. And I didn't know if my book was good enough. Well, over the past year, as I've spoken to more people, I've had people come up to me and say, man, this is really powerful stuff. So to give you an idea about the book, it's not a novel, it's a nonfiction, it's a memoir. It's got a lot of Camino stories in there. It's got a lot of sports stories of my experiences in Bologna, Italy, and at the University of Arizona. But the chapter titles are things like fear, failure, challenge, change, adversity, work-life balance, leadership, laughter, happiness. So each chapter kind of lives by themselves. At the end of each chapter, I've got 10 takeaways, 10 things about failure, 10 things about fear. So it's a self-improvement book, and it's done in a narrative of many of the stories that I've lived through my life, and some I've told you today during the podcast. So that's kind of the backstory, and I'm sticking to it.
Now, what did you learn? I know writing a book, no matter what it is a cathartic experience.
Yeah.
But what did you learn about yourself through that 6.5 years? Because who you were maybe at the beginning of that journey wasn't who you were at the end of that 6.5 years, because I know you are a person that always is evolving into somebody better and greater. So what did you learn about yourself?
So here's how I'm going to answer that question. If you look behind me, I've got the little quotes on the table over there, and I've got books down there, and I've got books in the bookcase over here. I'm a voracious reader of how I can become a better person.
Yeah.
And so when I started writing the book, my antenna were up all the time. I had laid out the framework and the skeleton of the book, but I was always thinking about, wow, excuse me, that's a story that would really fit in the adversity chapter, or that's a story that would really fit in the challenge chapter. And I'll give you an example. I came across a story from Japan called Kintsugi, Kintsugi. And it's a ancient story of when you break a piece of china in the United States, we get the broom and the dustpan, and we sweep it up and we throw it away. In Japan, they take those pieces and they glue it back together with glue that has gold dust in the glue. So you end up with a plate that has all these crack marks that are outlined in gold. So this thing that is cracked, the metaphor is we're all broken. Mm-hmm. We all have issues. We all have problems. And now this becomes a work of art because your flaws are seen for everyone to see. And so, that's an example of I thought, a great story that would play very well in the book. But not because I like it. I think it's because other people would like it. Yeah. And so those are the kinds of things I learned during the process. I learned a lot during the process. It wasn't just Bob Logan pulling the string, and blah, blah, blah. It was trying to create stories that either from my life or for something else that are powerful enough that somebody could gain some knowledge from and become better.
Yeah, absolutely. And if somebody is watching this or listening to this and saying, that really motivates me to write a book, and I don't want to go in the book, direction per se, but what would you tell somebody who has an idea floating around in their brain and they're thinking, yeah, I should do that someday? What's the best advice you could give them?
Stop making excuses. It's great to sit there and say, yeah, I think I should do that someday. Well, no offense, excuse my French, get off your ass and do it. I did this. It was harder than heck. I never thought I would get to the end game, but I was going to finish it no matter what. So, I can't tell you, Michelle, too, I'd be rich. I wouldn't have to speak anymore if I had people that came up to me and said, oh, I've been thinking about writing a book. Okay, great. Go write the book, So it's so satisfying to be able to, for your own purpose, to say you did it. Whether it's any good or not, it doesn't really matter. It's just self-satisfaction of accomplishing something that's really hard. And a lot of people avoid doing things that are hard, but doing things that are hard are going to make you a better person.
Oh, that is for sure. Yes. And feel the pain and do it anyway. And also there's a book, Feel the Fear and do it anyway.
The thing that I really want to highlight on my book, because not many people are doing this, I'm going to show you. I turned to a couple of pages. Yes. I talked to you about that Kintsugi, right? Yes. So I have in my book QR codes. Oh. So you can click on that with your phone and click that QR code, and it'll take you to a video about 2 minutes long, 3 minutes long about Kintsugi. So I've got a bunch of, like Jim Valvano, you may have seen his speech at the ESPYs, right? Yes. Well, I talk about Jim in my leadership chapter, and I've got the QR code. So some people have not seen that speech, the greatest speech in the history of public speaking, and you can watch his ESPY speech many years ago.
Yes. I was a temp one time at NC Biotech or something like that. And something I was doing had to do with Jim Valvano. And I got to see that speech and I saw it and I'm like, wow, this is what everybody's talking about.
Yeah. And I've even got him behind here. Up there's a Jim Valvano quote and the Sports Illustrated behind me too.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. And so now you're a the motivational speaker,
Yep.
you've added that. How is that different? How is that different from writing a book? Is like a book is like you're writing and you're writing and you're writing or you're typing, and then you parlay into speaking, and now people are watching you and their eyes are glued to you. How is that affect you differently?
It doesn't affect me differently at all because other than the standpoint, I mean, there's a lot of work and preparation. I mean, I have 3 or 4 talks that I give. They're not boilerplate. I kind of mix and match various things. I ask the client, you know, what is they looking for? So there may be some things I change up in the talk, but you know what public speaking is? All it is storytelling. And I can tell a good story. I've always been able to tell a good story. But the story has to have a message. It can't be a story just about Bob. It has to be a story that will resonate with them where they have a takeaway. Because the point is, you know, if I'm going to give a talk for an hour, they better have something to take back home with them that they can maybe implement in their own lives. So the challenge is making sure that these speeches are tight, because you know, you can get yourself in a position where you ramble if you're not tight on what you're talking about. And if you're really good at speaking, you can read a room and you know immediately when you're losing them. So it's just a matter of telling good stories and powerful stories.
Okay, well that's excellent, because a lot of people differentiate the two. Like, yeah, maybe I could write a book, but I could never talk in front of people, you know. And if you think about it, like you just said, storytelling, it takes on a different
Right,
meaning.
right. Well, and trust me, you're exactly right. I mean, I think what do they say? The 2 things most people are scared about is skydiving and public speaking. So, you
Yeah,
know,
and
public speaking is hard. It's an acquired skill, and not everybody can do it. But it's something that I felt like I have emceed events for many years, and people would always come up to me, Bob, hey, that was great. You did a great job. It was funny, and you should really think about speaking. You know, and I was deep into my job. I said, hey, I've got a real job. No thanks. But as I got near the end of my career, I said, you know, this is a way that I could continue to deliver messages when I'm done working at the university.
yeah, and absolutely. So I have 2 more questions for you.
Okay.
One has to do with your book, to go back to your book. What, when people, we're going to put a link to, you know, several
Okay.
links in the show notes, but I'm going to definitely put a link so people can buy your book.
Okay, great.
People, and I asked this for prospective book clients in my business, what I do, but when people, a person buys your book, they've read it, they've turned the last page, they've closed it. What is the main point you want people to take away from your book after?
I will put it in one word: perspective.
Okay.
It is it's a way to, you know, in this fast-paced life that we're in, and the pressures and being pulled in so many directions, we very rarely stop and take a deep breath and look around what's important to us. Now, I will tell you, I give talks on happiness, and there are 8 scientifically proven techniques to live a happier life. If you do these things, you will be a happier person. And that's in the book, that my chapter on happiness. And the point is, the COVID environment that we had to live through. Before COVID, I would go to companies and say, hey, I've got this great talk on happiness. And they go, oh, no. I want sales. I want leadership. I don't want my people to be happy. I want my people to be productive. Well, guess what? Everything's changed since COVID. With remote work, people are realizing that family is important, that friends are important, and work, let's be honest, is just a means to an end. And no matter what job you have, as big a title as you have, you are just a cog in the wheel. And 2 weeks after you leave your job, they're not going to even know you were there. So you better start living life understanding that there's more to life than work. And we are bad in the United States at this. So I think perspective is what you get as a takeaway, that I'm going to sit back and I'm going to do a few things differently going forward.
Oh, I love that. Okay. So everybody, you'll see the link in the show notes. I'm going to put it in my Amazon cart as well, because
Okay,
I
great.
always have a perpetual cart going,
Good.
Yeah. So my last question to you is that I mean, you've lived a whole life. You've done a whole lot of different things.
Right.
What exciting adventures do you have or see yourself doing in the next year or 5 years?
Well, I'll tell you for sure. One of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and walk the Camino, and the Camino is just it's kind of a, not to put it in the context of a Tesla electric vehicle. It's just like putting that thing in my body and kind of recharging me, right? And the cool thing about the Camino is the one I walked is the traditional one, but there are multiple Caminos coming from all over Europe in different directions, culminating in Santiago. So my wife and I are talking about going to Portugal. There's a Portuguese Camino. It's only about 2 or 3 weeks rather than a month, because the Camino takes about five weeks to walk. So that's on the short list of things that I'm going to do. The other thing I'm really excited about, hold on, excuse me, is, now that I'm retired for the most part, University of Arizona, we're number 1 in basketball. We're number, I think, 12 in football. Our athletic program is really taking off. And except from the years that I was an athletic director and a football coach, I've never really traveled to go watch our team play in the Final Four or, region. So I'm going to travel. I'm taking my son next week. We play Florida Atlantic in Las Vegas for a 1-game thing. We're going to fly in on Friday, and I love my 2 kids, and we're going to do a father-son deal in Vegas and go to the basketball game and sit in row 6. So experiencing some sports where I spent most of my life, I'm going to do it again, that I now have the ability and the money to do it.
That is awesome. Yeah. And I think it's so important to always have something in the horizon, always have plans and goals, because I know the Bible says without a vision, the people perish. And just in practical everyday life, I think you always have to have something. I'd like to do this. I'm going to plan for this. I'm going to take practical steps to make it happen.
Well, one thing I'll tell you, this is a bucket list thing, and I haven't really started to put, it could be another book, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
One of my things I'm thinking about doing is taking in some of the greatest football rivalries in the United States. Okay. So the athletic director at Alabama used to be at Arizona. He's a friend of mine. So I could go to the Alabama-Auburn game or Alabama-Georgia game. The AD at Texas, Chris Del Conte, is a former associate of mine. Go to the Texas-Oklahoma or whatever game. A buddy of mine works at Michigan, and I could go up to the Michigan. So I would love to go to the biggest and best rivalries and experience them firsthand and maybe put that on paper. I bet you there's a couple of stories there too.
Yes, and I'm sure there would be a couple of readers who would really love to read about the great rivalries.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Especially in college ball.
That's right.
There's more. And I know the NFL guys, when they get together, they talk about more of their college days than they do their NFL teams.
Absolutely.
Yes. How can people connect with you, Bob?
Okay, I'll give you everything. I've got a landing page for the book. It's very simple.
Great.
So it is letyourpathfindyou.com. Right. So just type that in. It'll take you to a book landing page, and it has an Amazon link if you want to buy the book at Amazon. You can also go to Barnes & Noble and buy it at Barnes & Noble as well. My website is very simple, boblogan.net. And my email is very simple, bob@boblogan.net. So any of those vehicles, please reach out. And I'd love, if you're interested in the Camino, I will talk to you about the Camino. I'm happy to do that. If you want to hire me to give a talk, I'm happy to have that conversation too. Anybody that wants to reach out, I want to develop a relationship with you.
Well, wonderful. On all that, thank you so much, Bob. I just really appreciate that. All your information, all your stories, and the value that you brought. And I think there's some intense, meaty, juicy, steak-sized wisdom in there of the things that you said. So I really thank you for being here and being a guest on Winning Proof Unscripted.
Well, let me finish with this too. I want to thank you for what you do. I mean, to help to write a book is a massive undertaking. And I had some other consultants that I work with. I should have called you. I didn't think about it, but to do it the right way, you need people that know what they're doing. You have to learn that you don't know it all. So you need to learn, I can't do an index. I can't do the end notes. I can't do the proofreading. So if you've got clients that are thinking about using you, make sure you connect with her, because to get to the end game, you need professionals to make it look like a professional book. So thanks for what you're doing in the book writing community as well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I always say that too. Don't let Aunt Bessie, that was a teacher in 4th grade, edit your book and proofread your book. And you do need professionals. So thank you for calling that out.
Yeah.
You do. And I'm always growing and learning in my profession too. I'm not stagnant in just like, oh, I know enough. I know enough. I don't know nearly enough. I'm always professionally and personally growing. And I think everybody needs to be that, or else it's so easy to become stagnant.
I'll tell you a funny story about proofreading. My book had been edited 2 or 3 times. Okay. Yes. I was done. I hated looking at my book. I just wanted it to be done.
Yes.
And my consultant said, you need to do one final round of serious proofreading. And I said, I think we're good. And know what she said to me? She said, I'll tell you what, we'll send it to the proofreader. If they find 20 mistakes or less, I'm going to pay for it. Not me. The consultant's going to pay for it. If there's more, then you have to pay for it, because it's obviously was needed. So I said, okay, good. I'll take that bet. And it went back. It came back with like 200 mistakes. So, you got to let the professionals do their job.
Absolutely, positively. And I do that for everything I write. And I'm a natural, writer from childhood, right. But I don't put anything out there of significance without having my proofreader from Canada
right.
looking at it. You're so right. Yeah. They catch things like, how did I miss that?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you. And I just want to thank everybody for coming to Winning Proof Unscripted. Thank you for watching this episode. And I will post this shortly. And until then, thank you for watching another episode of Winning Proof Unscripted.